Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started with the Budget and Finance Committee meeting for Wednesday, December 4th, 2013. At this time, I will be turning the meeting over to our executive to take it from here. Eric Stuckey.
Well, just real quick to get you started with the new election that we had in the fall here, and a new year, if you will, with the board. We have reconstituted the two committees of the board, which is the Budget and Finance Committee and the Capital Investment Committee. So this membership, which used to be the Capital Investment Committee, is now the membership of our Budget and Finance Committee. So as we do with a typical new setup, we go through and we get started with how we're going to be organized for the year. The first item that you have actually on your agenda is the approval of minutes, and I guess I'll walk through those two and then get you to your selection of chairperson for the committee. So first would entertain a motion for the approval of minutes from September 25th, a joint meeting, and October 23rd.
So moved.
Second.
All right, so we had a motion and a second. Do we have any discussion? Hearing none, I'll have a vote on the approval of minutes.
Aye.
All right, minutes are approved. The next item we need you all to take action on is the selection of your chairperson for the committee, and would entertain a motion selecting your chair.
I would move that we select Clyde Barnhill as chairman.
All right, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
I have a second.
Moved and seconded. And any other discussion? All right, without that, we'll go ahead and have a vote on the motion appointing Clyde Barnhill as chair of the committee. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, it is approved, and I'm glad to hand this responsibility over to Mr. Barnhill the rest of the way.
Well, the second item on the
I
agenda.
hope I did okay.
Yeah, you
Okay.
You did fine.
we may practice you a little bit.
Yeah, this is what I normally do.
Second item on the agenda should be the election of the vice chair of the committee. I'll open the floor up for nominations.
I move that we elect Dana McClendon as vice chair.
Second.
Proper motion. Any further discussion? All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Dana McClendon, vice chair.
I am dubiously honored.
While you're on the business of the group, I do want to, well, actually, we're going to talk about meeting dates at the end, so we'll go ahead and get to that. Okay.
Third item on the agenda, presentation of fiscal year 2012-2013 audit report. Dan Miller, Crosland Associates. Dan, you're up.
Real quick, as Dan gets started, the role of this committee is to also serve not only as Budget Finance Committee, but also as our audit committee. So you're putting on that hat today, and Dan from Crosland will take you through it. So take it away.
Well, thank you. Good afternoon. We certainly appreciate being here and the opportunity to meet with you to discuss the results of the audit. As you see, we've brought plenty of materials with us today. I'm going to start with this book with the flag and the lamppost on the front. This is the results of the audit of the city. Page 1 is an introductory letter stating that a direct line of communication between our firm and the committee, and really the entire board, is an essential part of an effective audit. So again, we appreciate being here. We want that direct line of communication with you throughout the year and certainly at these meetings. The letter also expresses our appreciation to management, particularly the finance department, for all of their hard work throughout the audit. They make our audit as efficient as possible, so we thank them. On page 2, the report on the results of the audit. We have completed the audit. We've drafted an unmodified opinion. That opinion states that the financial statements are fairly presented in all material respects in accordance with U.S. generally accepted accounting principles. The state of Tennessee does have oversight responsibility for our audit and approve the audit engagement through the standard comptroller's contract to audit accounts. In the middle of the page, we confirm that we are independent with respect to the city, both within the requirements of the American Institute of Certified Public Accountants and under government auditing standards. The engagement personnel are listed at the bottom of the page. Again, I served as first principal on the engagement. Dell Crossland, who is our managing principal of the firm, served as concurring reviewer. There were no significant changes in the team this year. On page 3, a little bit about our responsibility in performing the audit. Under U.S. auditing standards, we obtain reasonable but not absolute assurance about the fair presentation of your financial statements. So in order to obtain absolute assurance, we would be required to test every transaction during the year, and obviously that's not practical. So we do provide reasonable assurance about the fair presentation. In addition to the financial statement audit, we also audited the city's compliance with its federal grant programs under OMB Circular A133. In planning and performing both the city audit and the A133 grant audit, we consider and test certain elements of the city's internal control for financial reporting and on grant compliance. But we do not do sufficient procedures to give a separate opinion on the internal control. So there's no separate opinion on internal control, but we do say in the report that we did not identify any material weaknesses in those controls. On page 4, management makes significant judgments and estimates in the preparation of the financial statements. Those judgments and estimates are detailed there in the middle of the page. The more significant ones would be the useful lives and valuation of capital assets. Capital assets, of course, is one of the largest line items in your financial statements. The appropriateness of the assumptions used for pension and the retiree health plan obligations. Of course, management consults with the actuary in determining those estimates, but ultimately the responsibility rests with management to make sure those estimates and assumptions are reasonable. And then finally, the valuation of investments in the fiduciary pension fund for timberlands, real estate, and other private equity ventures. It's a pretty significant estimate and judgment. On page 5, audit adjustments. We did, as a result of the audit procedures, the city court recorded one audit adjustment, approximately $990,000, relating to streets. That adjustment was made to record two streets that had not previously been included on the listing. There were no unrecorded or past entries for the financial statements. Under significant accounting policies, the significant accounting policies are described in Note 1 to the financial statements. We have looked at those significant accounting policies as part of our audit and believe that they are appropriate and comprehensive under U.S. generally accepted accounting principles. Page 6, we did not note any instances in which management consulted with another accounting firm to obtain a second opinion on any financial accounting matters. We had no disagreements with management during the audit. There were no matters that we discussed with management prior to our retention that were considered to be conditions for our retention as the auditor. Encountered no significant difficulties in performing the audit and did not identify any fraudulent or material fraudulent or illegal activities, nor were any of those items disclosed to us by management. At the bottom of page 7 are our areas of audit significance. This is where we spent the majority of our time in our test work. So we do an entire planning process before we start the audit to assess the risks of material misstatement. And these are the areas where we felt were the riskiest and where we spent the majority of our time. Particularly, just want to point out a few with revenues. We looked at property taxes, sales taxes, state shared revenues and fees, and then contributions and grants. We made a consideration of the conference center activities. And then there was also implemented several new GASB statements, accounting pronouncements this year, which we're going to go through in just a second, that impacted the financial statements. On page 8, as I mentioned before, in addition to that financial statement audit, we also audited the city's compliance with the federal grant programs. And the city, you can see there, spent just over $2.5 million in federal grant programs this year. So we selected 2 of those grant programs for testing. We had no significant exceptions. We have drafted an unmodified opinion on compliance stating that the city complied in all material respects. Those recent accounting pronouncements I just spoke about are included on pages 8 and 9. There were several new accounting pronouncements implemented in the financials for 2013. Very briefly, GASB Statement 61 required the city to make additional consideration about the potential for component units to be included within the financial statements. Management did an analysis under that statement, determined that there were no additional no requirement for component units to be included within the city's financial reporting entity. 2 other statements, 63 and 65, were implemented together. These statements impacted the financials in several ways. The first, and probably the most significant, was that they required that bond issue costs be written off. So previously, under previous accounting treatment, you could capitalize the cost of any bond issuances and record and amortize those over the life of your bonds. Well, these 2 statements said, no, you can't do that anymore. You need to write off all your bond issue costs and then expense them now as incurred. So that statement did require about a $1 million write-off of the bond issue costs. That statement also made certain reclassifications to the financials, primarily in deferred charge on bond refundings and then unavailable revenues. There is one upcoming statement that's pretty significant and important for the committee to note. I know management is certainly aware of it. It's GASB Statement 68, which is detailed in the middle of page 9. That statement is applicable in fiscal year 2015, so about 2 years away, but it's significant. It relates to pensions, and it's significant in that it could require some additional liabilities to be recorded in the financial statements. What it's saying is that the unfunded portion of your pension obligation should be recorded in the financial statement. So the impact to Franklin should be less than most cities, because Franklin's in fairly good shape with its pension. It's about 80 or 90% funded right now, which is fairly good in comparison to most cities across the United States. But that statement still will have an impact. There will be some additional disclosures and the potential for some additional liabilities that you'll see coming in 2015. Something to keep on the radar. Starting on page 10 is the representation letter that we requested from management. Of course, during the audit, management makes a series of representations to us to answer questions that we ask. This letter confirms in writing those representations, so we've included that just for your informational purposes. And if you'll turn to pages 18 and 19, this is the management letter. We do have one management letter comment this year. We have discussed it with management. It does not rise to the level of being considered a significant deficiency or material weakness in controls, but it's something just for the city to consider. It relates to the valuation of street infrastructure assets. As we'll see in a minute on the financial statements, a very significant portion of the balance sheet and the statement of net position is included within street infrastructure. And as streets are donated from developers, the city is recording those in the financial statements based on an estimated cost per linear foot. That cost estimate is being is estimated by management. So our recommendation is simply that the city consider perhaps performing a survey of other cities around Tennessee, or perhaps occasionally, every few years, having an outside consultant come in to determine if that value that's being recorded for streets is reasonable and appropriate. I think that will help to support that significant amount that's going into the financial statements each year. So are there any questions on that?
When you're talking about the value of the streets, do you mean as they're built, what it costs to build them or maintain them?
To build them. These are developer-contributed streets. So the developer is building the streets and then contributing them to the city. So the cost is being put onto the financial statements just based on an estimate of per linear foot.
Versus what are you, not that you can
Well,
recommend.
it has to sort of be an estimate per linear foot. It's just how accurate can we get that estimate?
Oh, so we can still use that formula, but just be
Yes.
more
Kind of
accurate.
validate it.
Right. Right.
All right, you, back on page, whatever that was, on 9, page 9,
Yes.
the statement number 68 that's
Right.
going to be effective in 2015, how long will it take us to fully catch up? If that's going to be a liability?
No one knows. You know, it depends on so many things. It depends on how many employees stick around, how much turnover there is, what the earnings are in the pension plan.
Will we have caught up by 2015?
2 more years?
I would say it's a low probability that we would be at 100% by then, but we'll be closing in on that.
With the pension bond issue that should.
That's what I'm
Yes,
thinking
yes.
about, with that 10 million, okay.
So much depends on, you know, the market valuations and so many other things that go into the actuarial report. It's just very, very difficult to forecast.
But we'll be well along.
We will be well along. The one thing that I would add to that conversation is, unlike a lot of pensions that use what they call smoothing to determine what the assets are, we don't do that. We take whatever the market tells us. So we're not using 3-year or 5-year smoothing that you know, the California State Pension Plan or some of these others do. We take, you know, it is what it is.
Yeah.
And that's
okay.
what we take.
Okay.
That's a good thing in that it's a more honest approach. It's a bad thing in that there's a lot more potential volatility. So it's possible that we could be on average at 100%, but some years we'll be at 103 and some years we'll be at 96. It just depends
Okay.
on how our assets are valued.
All right. I just wondered if we would be safe by 2015.
We'll be much closer than we are today.
Okay,
But
thank you.
Eric, you gave a number of 90%
We're like
funded.
92% on our last quarterly report funded
Mhm.
versus our target, so we're
Closing.
pretty close, and the pension obligation bonds that will be issued in another week or so should help us significantly on that, but, you know, it's hard to project where we'll be exactly 2 years from now, and Russ summarized it well. There are a lot of variables, but we'll be in a very strong position, especially relative to most pensions across the country.
Is anybody at 100%?
There are, yes.
Very few. Very, very few.
Okay.
All
Thank
right, we'll get into the actual financial statements now, and I'm not going to obviously go through every page, but just hit some of the highlights. Several pages in, I think it's pages 1 and 2, is our independent auditor's report. And again, it is an unmodified opinion. The opinion describes the sections of this financial statement, this report that on which we give an opinion, and those sections that we do not opine on. Generally, we give an opinion on the basic financial statements and the notes to those financial statements. We do not give an opinion on the management's discussion and analysis section, the introductory section, or the statistical section. So all that's described in the auditor's report.
Dan, could you just, for the listeners at home, some people are familiar with the term unqualified, and you've twice mentioned unmodified. Can you
Correct.
just briefly explain that?
Yes, there were some changes in U.S. auditing standards this year that were applicable for fiscal year 2013 that changed that term unqualified to unmodified. So it's just a change in terminology that auditors are using. If you were to put this independent auditor's report with the one from last year, you will see some wording changes. And the U.S. auditing standards were changed in order to make this opinion more easily read. So to more clearly
It turned out
identify.
they didn't like labeling their own work unqualified.
Yeah. To more clearly identify what management's responsibility is and what our responsibility is to audit it. So. Pages 3 through 11 are management's discussion and analysis. This is really the best place in the report for a discussion of what happened to the city's financial position this year. So it's where management gets to tell the reader the financial statements. Here's what happened, why, here's what we're planning on in the future. That section also addresses the city's administration of its capital asset and its long-term debt as well.
Where is that?
That's on pages 3 through 11. It's a good section to start with when you get into the financial statements. And then following on pages 12 and
Well,
13.
before you leave,
Yes.
3, general fund balance increased $2,878,787 from the prior year. Do you want to touch on that, or
Yes.
you, later, or you want to?
Yes, I was going to touch on it in the actual financial statement.
Okay.
But really, it was a favorable budget to actual variance. And we'll see that in that budget to actual report. So on pages 12 and 13 are the government-wide statement of net position. This statement contains all of the city's assets and liabilities. You can see on page 13 at the bottom, total net position was $605 million at the end of fiscal year 2013. That's an increase of $36 million from 2012. And the detail of that increase you can see on page 14, which is the statement of activities. If you go all the way to the bottom of the page, about 3 lines up from the bottom, you can see change in net position, $35,955,000. 2 components of that. One is the governmental activities of about 28.9, and then business type of 7 million increase, which is water and sewer. So the main components of that increase in net position during 2013, general revenues were higher. Sales tax collections continued to be strong in fiscal year 2013. They were up about 7.2%, totaling almost $26 million. And then contributions of capital assets also remained strong in 2013 and totaled about $25 million. So between the stronger sales tax collections and the continued strong contributions of capital assets, you're seeing a lot of, those are 2 really good indicators that there's a lot of economic growth still going on in the city. On the water and sewer side, revenues were up about 4%, which is due primarily to rate increases that were effective in January 2012. And similar capital contributions were up for water and sewer, about a 27% increase over 2012. Pages 15 and 16 are the balance sheet for the governmental funds. And this is where you can see, if you go to the general fund column, at the very bottom, that fund balance, 28.8 million. And that, again, like you pointed out, was 2.9 million more than the previous year. The positive budget to actual variances were due primarily to cost containment measures in all of the city's departments. And we'll see that in the budget to actual report. And then there were certain unused capital funds, primarily in the Traffic Operations Center, that caused that budget to actual positive variance. There is one fund with a negative fund balance, the Road Impact Fee Fund. It was $854,000. That deficit was about $1.2 million last year. So the deficit actually decreased by about $350,000 due to stronger collections in 2013. Management is expecting that those strong collections will continue in the future and that deficit balance will continue to be reduced. If you'll turn to page 20, this is where you can see the budget to actual statement for the general fund. And provides a lot of good information, really revenues by line item, over and under budget. And then continuing all the way to page 28 is on the expenditure side, sort of by department. So again, you can see that I think every single department had a positive budget to actual variance on expenditures. And when you add those up, it equals the 2.9 million.
When you add what up?
If you were to add up all the budget variances on pages 20 to 28, well, it's actually totaled on 28.
Okay.
Yeah, net changes in fund balances, you can see the original and final budget were neutral, anticipating zero change in fund balance, but then actual was a positive 2.8 million. On page 35 starts the notes to the financial statements, and those continue all the way to page 60. I'm not going to go through any of those in detail, but those notes do provide really good information on capital assets, long-term debt, the pension and retiree health programs, and then also commitments and contingencies. So a lot of good information in those notes. On page 61 is the schedule of funding progress for both the pension and the retiree health plan. You can see the pension plan as of June 30th was about 86% funded. Health plan was about 24% funded. So this is where you'll see that trend of the funded ratio. And then on page 85 starts the statistical section to the report. I think I mentioned this last year and maybe the year before, but this section is really sort of fascinating because it shows the trends over the past 10 years. So you can really see how much the city has grown in that period of time by looking at this information. Just a few statistics. The city's net position has increased by $222 million over the past 10 years. The sales tax, the city's net position. So if you take all the assets minus all the liabilities, the net position has increased by $222 million over the past 10 years. Similar to that, sales tax collections have increased from 18 million in 2004 all the way up to 26 million in 2013. So again, you can see the increases there. Calls to the police and fire departments have also increased about 50% in that time period, which is very consistent with the increase in the population.
Yeah.
And then the final thing I'll point out is on page 105. These are 105 to 108 are two other independent auditors' reports that we issue in conjunction with the audit. And the first is on our consideration of the city's compliance with laws and regulations, and then also on internal control over financial reporting. So this is a standard report. Again, it does not identify any findings or material weaknesses. And then the second report describes our testing of the city's grant programs. Again, it's that OMB Circular A133 report. As I mentioned before, there were no findings in A133, but just wanted to point out the report for your reference. Any other questions on the financial statements?
Any questions from any committee member?
What was the two grants that you looked at?
Yes,
Which
those
grants?
are detailed
Where?
on page 109.
Okay.
We looked at, they're identified by CFDA number. So sort of toward the bottom of the page, that 20.205,
Transportation.
transportation planning, and 97.039 was hazard
Hazard
mitigation.
Okay, good.
So those two grants are 1.4 million out of a total of 2.5 spent. So
That was
it was
favorable.
about 58%
Okay.
of the total.
What was the hazard mitigation grant? Remember?
We had the opportunity to acquire some property through grant dollars that were received post-2010 flood. So we had two phases of that where we went through and worked with property owners voluntarily to acquire substantially damaged properties.
And you mentioned sales tax up 7 point something other percent to budget or to actual year before?
To actual
Year before? Okay.
So you found no deficiencies, no reportables? I mean,
No material weaknesses.
that's the word you used.
I
No
always like to
grant
know
findings.
what's your general opinion of us?
That's a good question.
How are we doing?
That's a good question. Well, there's several different ways to look at that. First, unmodified opinion on your financial statement. So clean audit opinion, which is good. Secondly, no material weaknesses identified in internal control.
That's good.
That's good. We had the one management letter comment, but that's something just for consideration for the city. So overall, very good.
Great. All
We're in
right.
good shape. Good. I always like the bottom line.
That's a good question.
Especially when it's a good bottom line.
Good question.
If there are no other questions, let's go to item 4, presentation of the fiscal year 2012-2013 Conference Center Audit Report.
And the audit results are included in this book with the sort of the map of the conference center on the front. On page 2, the report on the results of the audit. Again, we've completed the audit. We drafted our unmodified opinion on those statements. Again, that opinion states that the financial statements of the conference center are fairly stated in all material respects under U.S. accounting principles. Again, our confirmation of independence is there on the page. Continuing on page 3, Management's judgments and accounting estimates. The significant accounting estimates reflected in the conference center's financial statements include useful lives of capital assets and the appropriateness of the assumptions and the calculations made in allocating joint expenses. So under the agreements between the city, the county, and the hotel operator, the expenses are allocated to the conference center based on formulas that are in those agreements. And so as part of our audit plan, we looked at those allocations of the expenses being made to make sure that they were appropriate under the operating agreements. But that is, those calculations and those assumptions under the agreements are a pretty significant item in the financial statements. On page 4, there was one audit adjustment to record depreciation expense for the year. That's, of course, depreciation expense on the building itself and then all of the equipment, $521,000. There were no unrecorded or past entries. We reviewed the significant accounting policies of the center. They appear to be appropriate and comprehensive under accounting principles. On page 4, we had no disagreements or difficulties in performing the audit. And then on page 5, again, for the conference center are listed our areas of audit emphasis. Cash, including classification between restricted and unrestricted. Capital assets are about 98% of the balance sheet, so we spend some time looking at those. Operating revenues, we make a specific selection of events that happen during the year and test those events to make sure that the revenue is appropriately recorded. So that's how we cover operating revenues. And then again, for operating expenses, we look at the allocation of those expenses to the conference center from the hotel.
What would be the cash classification, restricted versus unrestricted?
And we'll see this in the financial statements, but there's some restricted cash primarily for future capital items. So, and that amount has been growing over the past few years because they're anticipating some capital renovations over the next year or two.
So restricted is for any capital
assets.
expenditure or replacements. They're
Yeah. Like a few years ago, they put in the flat screen monitors throughout the conference center, upgraded some furniture, some of the things you need to have to keep it fresh. So they put dollars aside on a regular basis for those kind of improvements.
And it's required by the contract.
Yes.
We actually make them take 4% off the top of the revenues and put it aside for capital replacement before they figure out how much they send to the city or the county every month.
And I probably should know this. How much more debt service, how much more do we have
It's gone.
gone?
We got rid of it about a year ago,
All right.
or 2 years ago.
It was about this time last year.
Last year, yeah. Yeah, end of last calendar year, we made our last payment.
Great.
So everything's just free?
Nothing is ever free.
Unless you
Well,
are,
we're not paying debt service anymore. The city isn't. I believe the county still is, but we
Yes.
are.
Just
We are.
icing.
We are free of debt for the facility.
Profit.
Icing on the cake.
we
I
might,
like that
we
better.
might be at the icing between the layers.
Well, and really what we do is all of it gets folded into your hotel motel tax fund.
Yeah.
So that is a mix of all the different obligations you have out of that, and the debt service was paid out of that as well. So it's really freed up capacity in that fund to be available for whatever you identify as uses from that fund as well. So.
Well, another general question then. What about Harlansdale? Where do we stand on that as far, because we use the hotel motel tax there also?
Yes. You're still paying debt service for Harlansdale and Eastern Flank acquisitions out of that. And Russ, I don't know off the top of my head the time frame for that retirement. Do you?
Well, one was a 20 and one was a 15-year note. We've refunded one of them, so I'll have to go back and look and see what the actual final maturity is
Okay.
on the Harlansdale. but there is still a ways to go. There's 10 years at least on each.
But there's more available for that since the conference center's taken care of.
That is correct.
And you were accommodating all of those
Right.
before, and now one of them has dropped off,
One was dropped
which
off.
is a overall net positive for the fund.
All right, I'll point out just a few things on the conference center financial statements, which is the last look that you have. If you'll turn to page 5. This is the conference center's management's discussion and analysis. And in that discussion, it is noted that there has been some increased competition at the conference center this year, which impacted operating results. The operating results are still positive, but you'll see when we get to revenue, they were down somewhat. And then management is projecting similar results for 2014. On page 12 is the statement of revenue, expenses, and changes in net positions, really the income statement of the conference center. And you can see at the very top, operating revenue was nearly $7 million in 2012, down to about $6.7 million for 2013. Again, due to that increased competition, there was a decrease in the number of events held this year. So in the middle of the page, operating income, $501,000 in 2012, $208,000 2013. And as a result of that decrease in operating income, the distributions to the county and the city also decreased. You can see moving a few lines down, net distributions to local governments, $734,000 last year and versus $492 this year.
That's not
So the operating income decreased by about 293, distributions to the owners decreased about 242.
So, Eric, are we guessing then that we had less events, or we just had more facilities to handle the number of events that we
I
had?
believe the total number of events were down
Down.
from the prior year. There is some more competition in the market. There's a similar conference center in Murfreesboro now that has a little more size, is a little newer, and that does create a little more competition for some of the, kind of our sweet spot for business, which is sort of state association type meetings and those sort of things that are opting for that as an option as well. So we recognize that, and the operator does as well.
So we should be anticipating this net position to perhaps continue to decrease? Correct.
I think what we're seeing is a similar performance is projected this year, sort of consistent with
With where we are right now?
the year that we're just talking about, that we'll have a similar performance. So
So distribution
not up
could
to
be,
the prior year, but consistent with this year, or pretty close to this year.
so distribution could be $500,000, the same this year as last year, but not the $734,000 the previous year.
That's what we're understanding as a projection at this time.
Want to make sure you understand in the net position drop,
Yeah.
that includes that $500,000 of depreciation.
Right.
That's not really a cash outflow. You know, that's a bookkeeping entry to recognize the aging of the property.
Okay.
Well, I guess we could always be like Las Vegas and just implode it and build another one. Up to date. That's what they do on everything.
Not sure we want to be like Las Vegas. Been there.
Interesting analysis.
A lot of cranes not moving in Las Vegas.
That's not our image.
Yeah, they just knock it down and build a better one.
And the last item I'll point out in the conference center financial statements are two notes on pages 18 and 19. These notes describe the contractual arrangements between the city, county, and hotel operator. and then also describe the allocation of those expenses that we were talking about earlier. So that's two important notes to read to really understand the operations of the conference center.
And over this last year, we have just extended that operating
I was
agreement.
gonna say, it's 15 years. Where are we on that?
We just extended it earlier this year.
Okay.
Working with the county. Gosh, I think mid-year sometime?
Mid-year, yes.
Mid-year.
Cover that catering agreement just a little bit. I'm not sure that I,
Yeah, there are certain, under the agreements, there are certain sort of management fees that the hotel operator gets for managing the center. And those, really, there's three: the franchise, operating, and catering. So they're set amounts in the agreements, and they increase either according to the consumer price index or 3%. So you'll see that, you know, this year it was 178 versus 175 last year.
Well, they do a good job, and I hope they continue to do well, and
hope we continue to do well.
They do well, we do well.
Any other questions?
Any questions from anyone?
I was looking at risk management. What is our risk with the hotel? I mean, is there a liability or with injuries or fire or, I mean?
It's fully insured. In fact, we just saw the certificate come in earlier this week, the insurance certificate. So as part of the contract, they're required to keep a certain amount of insurance, and that is expensed as part of the expenditures in this fund.
Okay, so we're covered from a liability standpoint.
We think we are. You know, we consistently review that. You never know if you're fully covered, depending on, you know, how costs move around, but we look at it annually to try to make sure that it's covered to the extent possible.
Right?
Hey,
Good
Dan,
report.
One thing, even though these say draft, these will likely be the final numbers, will they not?
Correct.
they what, Steve?
What it is, the reports say draft, and these should be the final numbers.
That, the related party transactions, the $12,930 and $18,277, is that for the year or the month?
The month. They pay monthly in arrears. So the month of June. Yeah, and the reports we bring to you in draft form so that you have some time to look at them and then we can finalize them. I think the plan was to do that before the board meeting.
This is on the December 10th agenda as a receipt by the board. You don't do anything other than just receive the audit, but that is our plan, to have the final document. And as Mike and Dan indicated, while this says draft, we believe these are the final numbers. This has been reviewed and reviewed and reviewed, and do anticipate there won't be any changes in what you were presented with tonight.
Good report.
Well,
We
thank
like-
you. We
We like good reports. Glad you didn't fuss at us.
You're glad.
We certainly appreciate the opportunity to work with you and with the city.
We appreciate the work they did, and as Dan said, our finance team does a tremendous job, and this is also a team effort across the organization. Different folks respond and work very cooperatively with the auditors, with finance, to get them the information they need so that they can get their work done and do it effectively. So I want to thank our team for doing that, finance in particular for taking the lead with this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Item 5, consideration of resolution 2013-78, reclassification of one full-time sanitation and environmental services driver, operator, to 1 full-time technical support analyst within the SES departmental organization. Becky Caldwell, sanitation and environmental services director.
Yes, sir.
You're up.
This is a request to ask for, it's approximately $8,000 when you compare the minimum of a pay grade C to a minimum of a pay grade E. That is already in as part of the budget with a vacancy adjustment and some of the other vacancies we've had. This position would be responsible for the website portion for our department, the portion of our city website. It would be responsible for the Infor Hanson utility billing portion, as well as the customer service portion of what we use that software for. Responsible for our routing software, essentially our computer software departmental representative to work with the IT department, and to also make sure that folks within the department are trained and ready to go and well-versed on the software that we use.
Do you already
Are
have
you-
somebody?
No, ma'am. We just,
Oh, okay. You asking for this now? or you
Essentially,
asking
this would
for-
be a repurposing of a vacancy
Mm-hmm.
to help Becky operate and the department operate more effectively, and she'd be absorbing this within her existing budget. We would just be doing some reorganization with that in mind, and it's her judgment, and we support it from the administration side in making that change that'll help the department run more effectively.
Move for approval.
Proper motion. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
thank you.
Got
Now,
another one? No.
Will it go to the board on consent?
Well, because of the time frame on the agenda, we put it on new business, because we didn't know how
That's
this
fine.
discussion would go tonight, so we went ahead and just put it on new
But
business, so
not
you
on
will vote on
discussion,
it.
but on the board.
It's not on work session, it
Work
is on
session.
for a vote, so that we can move forward with getting the position process going for filling it, because we don't meet again until January 14th.
It's true.
So you'll see that with the next item as
All
well.
right. Item 6, consideration of resolution 2013-79, personnel change from seasonal employees to full-time employment. Lisa Clayton, Parks Director.
Thank you, sir. Basically, as what Becky just said, this would be absorbed in the fiscal year budget if you foresee it moving forward. Parks and Recreation have always had seasonal employees. Their work, 40-hour work week, they're 1,500 hours. And we've been able to do that since I've been with the city. Now that the Fair Labors Act has changed, they define Parks and Recreation seasonal employees only between a certain month, almost like you would look at outside recreation, such as like a baseball or football and that type thing. They do not recognize any seasonal employees that we've been able to house, such as our tree workers or landscaping, when it's in the off-season. And landscaping does most of our preventative maintenance in the off-season. That's when we're the busiest, is going through fall, winter, and early spring. And we do a lot of maintaining in the rest of the year. Within the memo itself, we have 3 seasonal, in this current fiscal budget, 3 seasonal employees that approximately was around $62,000 within the budget. What the Parks Department is proposing is within the organizational chart is to take a look of taking the 3 seasonal and turning it into 2 full-time employees. One would be landscaping, and the other would be what we consider grounds worker. They would work in the landscaping portion of, and then transfer over to the mowing division, basically for once that season starts. The total for two full-time employees is around $87,000, which is the difference between the seasonal and the full-time. You're looking at roughly $25,000. We would absorb this in our current budget upcoming, in the current budget, we'd absorb it this year, but we would need to make adjustment as we go through the budget to look at organizationally of taking on 25,000 more each additional.
So when you bring the new budget to us, automatically, we're gonna see a $25,000 increase.
You're gonna
in the
have to,
budget
yeah.
Because of this right here.
Yes, sir.
But what you're saying now is you have the money now to absorb that change into this fiscal year's budget.
You're correct. We've got 12 pay periods left in this fiscal year budget, which is approximately around 27.6. And so we have it within the budget to accommodate that if you see fit to do so.
And we change, and account, something changed that says that we are no longer using 1,500 hours to do part-time. It is now the specific months, and I can't see them from here anyway, so, but it's a month's thing from 1,500 hours.
Basically, the rules of the game have changed on us a little bit in terms of how we can handle seasonals. It gets difficult to keep them as seasonals. It's Lisa's judgment that, and working with HR and looking at this issue, that this would be better to go ahead and transition to full-time. We think we might get a little more productivity long-term out of full-time employees anyway. I would just add a little editorial comment. Lisa and her team have done a great job of staffing over the years and really working within their means with a combination of seasonals, part-times, and full-times, and kind of worked with that in adjusting to what our needs are, and this is another step in doing that, given some of the changes in the regulations we have to deal with. So it will create a budget-to-budget thing we'll have to look at when we develop the new budget, and she's able to absorb it in this year's budget, as you kind of correctly identified, but and I think it's laid out here pretty clearly, but I think that's going to be the best way for us to function and deliver in parks long-term, given these requirements.
Lisa, I agree with your memo as saying that, you know, November, December, January, those months, you guys are still out there doing stuff.
Oh, absolutely.
And so we really need, you know, your team out there doing those things. So, Mr. Chairman, I move approval.
Proper motion second. Any other discussion?
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
What Reform Act?
Well, that was we looked at the Obamacare, but you've got the
Fair Labor
Fair
Standards
Labor
also.
Standards Act.
How they define seasonal workers has
It's
been
part of
tightened.
Our federal government has come to help us.
Again.
Awesome.
With no
And
money.
Lisa is here telling us that she needs more than Mr. Chadwell and Sam Overstreet.
just a little, but they did an awesome job.
Absolutely.
Rest in
That
peace,
w-
both of them.
That's right. But we're continuing the tradition and with award-winning facilities, too.
Yes,
so.
yes.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Again, on the voting session, not on the work session.
Exactly.
Correct. Thank you, Madam.
Item 7, discussion regarding comprehensive parks master plan. You're up again.
Yes, sir. Over the last 6 months, the Parks Department, along with numerous departments, have been looking at this with the parkland dedication. Many of you have sat through numerous meetings with us. What we have heard from the development community, what we've heard from, what I'm recommending is from staff standpoint, from the city, as well as it was brought out from the board members during those meetings, is a comprehensive master plan needs to be developed for our city. Within that comprehensive master plan, you would look at a needs assessment. You would look at the analysis of creating if we keep the parkland dedication as is, or if it changes in some form or fashion, you have to have a nexus to show that where certain money, if it's fees in lieu of, should be connected to land or facilities or whatever that may look like. We've done a fantastic job, as I've said in those meetings, as a city of doing individual master plans for parks, but we've never made the connection of everything, and including our greenways. We have got a master plan on those. So I think creating that full master plan, at least a 10 to 15-year plan to provide direction, is something our community is aggressive and progressive. Our community is. We need that. and that's what I'm proposing tonight. I've spoken to quite a few firms that look at Parks and Recreation master plans, not only within the state of Tennessee, but also outside of the state that's comparable, including areas such as Atlanta, even Louisville, areas that are even Charleston, South Carolina, that's comparable to us and what we do with outside facilities. The total budget impact, and there would be, is a proposal between 115 to 125. The range is in there because depending on what may come through, it allows us to have that flexibility, but would not exceed 125 is what's being recommended. We also recommend to take a look at the hotel motel tax to pay for this. It is new growth. It is definitely tied to that. And so that is what I have so far. Mr. Zuki, if you
We're
have-
really giving you a heads up at this point. I don't know that we need a formal action from the committee.
RFP.
This is just consistent with what's coming. Ultimately, a budget amendment will likely be required. I would guess maybe not, you see the first quarter here today, but it'll be one of the future quarterly budget amendment groups likely come through. So I think this is just in a way of making you aware, identifying that this need will likely be coming in this fiscal year, and a budget adjustment is going to be needed at some point. And Lisa will work with Mike and Russ in finance to bring that forward at the appropriate time.
I would like just to verify something with you, Lisa. I understand you'd get a firm to do this. We would get a firm to do this. But I really would like to see you lead this. I mean, there's nothing wrong with the firm doing it, except you know what our needs are. You've been here long enough to know what our needs are. You've seen the skate parks and the dog parks and those things come because you've been open to that. But you know what we need. And it's okay with me for a firm to do it, but I want you to have the upper hand in it. I don't want anybody telling you what to do.
That sounds great in theory, but I appreciate the confidence. I really do. And if I may be just as honest, we need some help.
Yeah.
That's
And to create that framework, you're exactly right. The community as a whole, and the development community, I have been before that group of our development professionals and design professionals, more than I would say that I probably have in a long time. Every one of them have been so supportive, but they all understand that we just need some type of action plan. We need a strategic plan, and we'll all be, it's not just parks, but planning and engineering, and because all of them are tied together. When you talk about greenways, you also tying them to road projects, you're tying them to the river, you're also talking about new development. This really needs to be a comprehensive city master plan. It will have those park elements, of course, but what does our community need? And including private and nonprofit, of where do they see the recreational needs to be? So from a facilitation standpoint, I see such a plus by having an outside firm.
Well, that's fine
but
with me,
absolutely.
as long as you are the head of it, as
We'll-
far as we're
we'll
concerned.
definitely, we'll definitely be in that car.
Because sometimes
She'll be
we've had people come in and give us, you know, a study for something or a plan for something, and it's a generic thing.
Oh,
If
absolutely.
they come from other places and stick us with all this stuff that we don't need or don't want.
Exactly. And one of the things the city has done so well is we have a lot of plans already. They need to be able to make the links between the existing plans that we have and then what is the new. And it's not just parks plans, but it's that land use plan that we have. How do you make those connections? And I think from a standpoint, you know, it's hard to beat our GIS. It's hard to beat the things that we currently have within our city. It's about taking all of it and saying, here's a good strategic plan, and here's how it's laid out. But it's also laying out that financial component of capital projects and what the cost is going to be, and then tying it also into personnel as we're talking about tonight. It all is tied in together, and I think that's kind of where I see it ought to
That's
to
fine.
lay out.
Well, I think what we had out of that joint conceptual workshop the other night was pretty much what you're bringing forward here. My question, we need to implement this, we need to start this before you do the new budget, and could it be included in the new budget? Therefore, it would not really be started until July the 1st of next year. I'm just,
I think the reason we're bringing it to you now is we'd like to get that process
Okay.
going, turn Lisa and staff loose on doing the RFP and identify who that provider is. The reality is probably most of it will be paid next year, but for us to be able to move forward, get it awarded, and get that process started, and that's why we're having this discussion.
Correct. Yes, sir.
well, I think that was pretty much the consensus that came out. I mean, each of us had our own opinion, pocket, park, whatever, but I think that we were looking at a comprehensive parks master plan that tied everything together that we could tie together, so.
Thank you.
And you do not need
I don't
action
think
right
we
now.
need anything
Don't need it.
specific on this, just to know that that's really some, I guess, a coming attraction, if you will.
Exactly. Thank you.
Thanks.
Item 8, consideration of ordinance 2013-64, an ordinance of FY 2014 first quarter budget amendments. Mike, you're up.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, a recommendation from the committee is recommended to the full board on this item. Prior to 2013, the city received notice from the state that it had looked at the way we presented interfund services in our budget. And they had thought that when they look at other cities, how they do it. And they had said that other cities, instead of showing as revenue like we do, they show it as a reduction of expenditures. So at the end of 2013, in the fourth quarter amendments, we went ahead and made that change. So essentially, revenues and expenditures basically changed by $2 million. It doesn't change.
Decrease.
It decreases. And so essentially what happens is, essentially there's no budget effect. It's just basically a difference in presentation. So if you look at these first quarter amendments, what would happen is, instead of total revenues and total expenditures being $57.9 million, it would become $55.5 million. So essentially, if a recommendation could be made to make this change in the presentation, and what the interfund services are, it's essentially where the departments in the general fund, like human resources, finance, engineering, purchasing, they'll provide services to the water sewer, to the stormwater, to the sanitation fund. So that's basically what the state is asking. Instead of showing as revenue, show it basically as a reduction of expenditures.
Housekeeping.
It is, and one thing just
Clean it
to,
up.
since this group is new to this responsibility, we established a practice a couple of years ago of doing quarterly budget amendments, just capturing everything in a quarter, bringing them together, after each quarter to the committee and then on to the board for approval, so that we're keeping on our budget and making adjustments on a systematic basis. So this is just a way to do that, and we're capturing this the first quarter. This is a good time to capture this change and go from there.
So this is July, August, September.
This,
Correct.
yeah, first 3 months of the year.
You want a motion?
Yes.
We would need one.
All right,
yes.
I so move that we present this to the board.
Second.
Any other discussion? All in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Item number 9, discussion regarding acceptance of electronic payments, credit cards. I believe we've heard this one before, Ms. Sims.
Can't believe we're not already doing this. Thought we'd heard that a long time ago.
Yes, ma'am, we are.
We are.
And what happened was previously we had told the Finance Committee that we were going to go out with a request for proposal to look at a vendor to be able to accept and process our credit cards for us. That was to align with the deployment of our N4 utility billing CDR applications. As those slowed down, we recognized that it would be inefficient and even costly to try to make that adjustment prior to the time that we actually implemented and deployed that N4 product. And so what we're coming forward is to advise you that what we need to do is just hold up on issuing that RFP until we're better in a position to be able to use the N4 tool. We continue to use the existing contract. It's allowed. It's there's no requirements needed to that contract, and so there would be no change in business as a result of that.
So what do you want us to do?
Nothing. It's just to advise you that we would be sliding that and not be going out with a new proposal.
That's not too complicated committee action, is it?
So,
What do we pay for with credit card now?
3%.
We pay 3, but what do we allow to be paid with a credit card?
Utility bills, court payments, and some permits and licenses.
But since we changed the property taxes to go to the county, they would be responsible. Does the county take?
Yes,
Do
sir.
they take the credit card
Yes,
on
sir.
the property?
But you
taxes?
pay a
Yes.
fee
They
directly.
pay a fee, a property owner will pay a card fee if they want to use a credit card or debit card to make a payment for property tax, but they'll pay it to the county. The trustees went across the state, and so in their case, they had some advantage because they were able to get some mass buying power in order to do that. So their rate's a little bit less for the property tax.
But that payer does pay it, it's not
But
absorbed.
right, but it's not something that we discount, and
Right.
That's
we're
correct.
getting 3% less if
We're
somebody
getting our
pays.
full property tax out of it, the
That's
payer pays
correct.
the fee.
That's correct.
and customers can also go online to their banks and pay online?
Yes, ma'am.
Online banking?
Yes, ma'am.
For
That's
utilities, for permits,
for utilities.
utilities, pretty
Yes,
much
ma'am.
only, okay,
You can use your online banking tool to be able to push the file payment to us.
yeah.
As well as draft. We do offer automatic draft. That's really the low-cost option
Right.
for utility bills.
Just want to make sure the audience out there, our public
Yes.
knows that, yes.
Been doing that a long time.
So this is really an update as well, I don't think we need any specific action.
No action is needed.
at this
It's just
point.
to inform you that we'd be much better off to just hold up until we're, ready to implement the N4.
Do you have a tentative timeframe?
I think you'd be issuing the RFP in the summer,
Someone, okay. Thank you.
late spring maybe.
Item 10, discussion of proposed revisions to the city's purchasing policy. Brian?
This is our Brian Wilcox section, we've got 4 items in a row that Brian's gonna bring to you.
Good evening. When I come to Budget and Finance Committee meetings, I often introduce myself and remind you who I am because I don't often come. But this being a new membership of the committee, I can just forego all of that. For all you know, I always come to the Budget and Finance Committee.
Other than if we were here last month.
The first topic is the proposed revisions to the city's purchasing policy. The policy was last updated in July of 2011 by resolution of the Board of Mayor and Aldermen. In order, however, to be more explicit that the use of requests for proposals is authorized by the board for use by the city, we have prepared for your consideration some proposed revisions to that policy. There are 2 places in the handout where the recommendations are more substantive. The first is on the first page, and it lays out the 4 primary tools we use whenever we need to undergo our own competitive process. Previously, we didn't say that these are the tools we use because we've always been using them. And it seemed that the state statute that I refer to in the cover memo would like us to be a little more explicit, especially about the use of requests for proposals. So included in the bullet list on on the new, on the first page of the recommended changes are requests for quotations, solicitations for bids, requests for proposals, and requests for qualifications. Those are the four primary tools I think of as being in our toolkit for when we need to go through a competitive process. So the new language is what's underlined there and is an attempt to be more explicit that requests for proposals, among other tools, are specifically authorized for use by the City of Franklin. The second substantive change is on page 10, clear at the end, just before the appendix. And it's a new section S entitled Requests for Proposals, and it lays out when RFPs are appropriate to use. And this language is pretty much copied and pasted in from the state statute. It's not language that we invented. It's language that we're putting into our policy from state statute. I would say that we don't often do that. I mean, that's, a state statute doesn't need to be re-presented in a local policy, but in this case, the state statute really wants the board, in our case, the Board of Mayor and Aldermen, in a governing body, to have put their fingerprints on authorizing use of requests for proposals. And that's why we're recommending that we be explicit in our policy about when they are appropriate to use. So it's really not a terribly substantive recommendation that we're making. It's more, I think of as a housekeeping. Doesn't change our procedures in any significant way, just cleans up the policy to make it a little more compatible with what the statute implies.
So this is nothing new for you? This is what you've been doing all along?
It's-
You're just putting it here for us to see?
Yes, exactly.
So,
Thank you.
I think in this case, do you want the committee to endorse this so
Yes,
that you
please.
can prepare a resolution for a board approval down the line?
Yes. Yeah, the means for approving these changes would be that we would prepare a resolution that would be attached to the proposed changes, and you would, I'll have to consult with the law department. It may be that the resolution will say the old policy is hereby repealed and that here's the new policy, or it may say here are changes to the policy. Either way, we'll get from where we are to where we want to be by form of a resolution that we'll draw up and have for you in January, if that's your wish.
You know, you probably would have been all right to have had this in resolution form even tonight.
That'd be fine.
Yeah.
I-
So, from
But we will
a committee
endorse.
standpoint, I endorse this.
Yeah.
And from a committee, we could give you the nod. I mean, it's done a
well, you
vote.
want a motion?
I'd like, if we can get a motion, then we'll just put, because you've got the substance of what's going to be considered. The resolution is essentially going to be a cover to this. I mean, it's going to
Okay.
describe it. So if you can endorse these proposed changes, we'll just add a resolution to the front of it and put it on a consent agenda, assuming the full
I
committee's in
move-
favor.
I move that we endorse these changes so that you can do whatever you need to do with it.
Put in resolution form.
Put
Second.
it in resolution and submit it to the board.
Let me clear that out. Second.
Proper motion and a second. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Item 11, discussion of proposed revisions to the city's vendor protest procedure.
Right. The protest procedure was last updated in March 2011, also by resolution. Staff recommends a number of changes, and I have outlined what the more significant of those are on the cover memo. There are 6 of them, and I'd like to just zip through those quickly, if I may. The first is the proposed revisions use language consistent with the purchasing policy to differentiate procurement pertaining to new construction and we're now using the language design and/or construction of new infrastructure and facilities versus procurement not pertaining to new construction. So it's just a language semantic kind of update to make it consistent with the purchasing policy. Number two, the proposed revisions clarify that the protest procedure only applies when a formal procurement solicitation involving public advertisement and sealed submittals is involved, and when the bid or contract amount is equal to or greater than $25,000. Number three, the proposed revisions clarify the categories of topics that may be protested. I should acknowledge legal assistance that the engineering department has obtained in connection with their packet of procedures in connection with construction. And I took a look at those and said, that lays it out nicely. Let's copy and paste some of that language into our policy as well. Number 4 and 5 and 6 all have to do with timing. 4 is the proposed revisions increase from 3 to 7 calendar days the allotted time for filing a protest. Number 5, the proposed revisions increase from 3 city business days to 7 calendar days the allotted time for other parties to respond to a protest. Other parties would be, for example, if the second low bidder protests, we need to give time to the low bidder and perhaps to other bidders to respond, because they may have an interest in the outcome of that protest. And then finally, number 6, the proposed revisions increase from 3 to 10 city business days the allotted time for the purchasing manager to respond to a protest. We've had a little experience and found that the 3 city business days was nerve-wracking and hard to make work well.
So your 7 calendar days and 7 calendar days and 4 and 5 match then?
Yes.
Yeah, that's fine.
I would like to just point out that on number 4, where we are recommending a increase from 3 to 7 calendar days, the allotted time for filing a protest, that has a consequence that we need to all be aware of. Right now, we try not to present to you procurement recommendations at a work session and at a voting session on the same date. But on occasion, we do ask you to consider them on the same date. This change, number 4, will have a consequence related to that. If we post on the city's website our recommendation to you on Friday, which is the Friday before the board meeting, which is our standard timing, and by the way, we picked that day because that's the day, or maybe the day after, you receive your agenda packet materials, and we think it's important not to put that on the website before the Board of Mayor and Aldermen receive their agenda packet materials. Anyway, if we keep to that timing, then the 7-day period will not yet have expired by the time the board meeting comes, whereas under the old timing of 3 calendar days, it had expired. That's in fact the whole idea of the old timing. You may wonder, well, why are we bothering to change it? And the answer to that is that that the state statute that I referred to earlier on the previous agenda topic having to do with requests for proposals, that same statute spells out a 7-day protest period for requests for proposals, and we think it's advantageous for us to be consistent with what the state says for RFPs.
Have you had trouble before with that? Have you had any complaints about that?
I don't want anyone to accuse me of being superstitious, but I'd like to say, knock on wood, we've had very little experience with protests. Since my having been on board with the city, and I don't mean to claim credit for this, it's just my time frame. During my time frame, I can think of only one formal protest that's been filed with the city. And it was filed within the 3-day period. However, I happen to know that they were scrambling to meet that deadline. So I think that these changes are appropriate and they treat people with a little more
We're trying to be nice.
accommodating.
Yeah.
Exactly. But we just need to be aware that some recommendations that come before you, if they're going to be on the same agenda, and again, we try not to do that on a regular basis, but if they are going to be on the same agenda, then we may have a recommendation that says that the approval would be conditioned upon no protest being filed during the protest period, or some such language.
Sounds good.
So you need a motion also then to prepare an ordinance to revise to the revisions to the city's vendors protest procedure.
Correct. This too would be resolution,
Resolution.
not ordinance. The means
Resolution.
for approving these recommended changes would be a resolution, which we would prepare for your consideration at the
Mr.
next
Chairman?
available agenda.
I move that we approve the revision of the city vendor protest procedure and move to the plan of resolution.
Proper motion, is there a second?
Second?
All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Number 12 is discussion of establishing policy and procedure for suspension and debarment of vendors and contractors as needed.
I like this.
Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, we're not here this evening to discuss any particular contractor or vendor that we have an issue with. And
Thank
we
You were told to say that.
We don't even bring this to you with any particular case in mind. This is something that's been on my to-do list for a long time. In fact, you'll find that it's on Brian's to-do list for 2013, and 2013 is coming to a close, and so I thought I better hurry up and get my thoughts collected on this subject. In public procurement, the concept of suspension and debarment is well established. Typically, debarment involves excluding a person for cause from consideration for award of contracts, usually for a period of not more than 3 years, while suspension involves excluding a person from consideration if there is probable cause for debarment, usually for a period much less than 3 years. The causes for debarment typically involve conviction for commission of a criminal offense and as an incident to obtaining or attempting to obtain a public or private contract or subcontract, conviction under state or federal statutes of embezzlement, theft, forgery, bribery, falsification, or destruction of records, receiving stolen property, or any other offense indicating a lack of business integrity or business honesty, conviction under state or federal antitrust statutes, violation of contract provisions of a character which is regarded by the awarding agency to be so serious as to justify debarment action, for example, deliberate failure to perform or a recent record of failure to perform or of unsatisfactory performance. Any other cause so serious and compelling as to affect responsibility as a contractor for the awarding agency, including debarment by another governmental entity, and finally, for violation of ethical standards. This list, A through F in my cover memo, is an excerpt from the American Bar Association Model Procurement Code. This is not City of Franklin language. This is sort of industry standard language. Staff views the subject of debarment and suspension as another tool in the procurement toolkit that we recommend the City of Franklin add to its toolkit. And the means for doing this, unlike the previous two agenda topics, which were by resolution, the means for doing this, because there's due process involved, would be by ordinance. So this would require 2 readings, I guess, of the Board of Mayor and Aldermen as such ordinances. This would wind up in the municipal code, the City of Franklin Code of Ordinances.
I have a question,
Certainly.
Mr. Wilcox, Mr. Chairman. Do we do a background check on people when they come when we award contracts?
The answer is it depends, and generally it depends on whether we've done business with that vendor before. You know that the world of purchasing in the city of Franklin is divided between construction-related and everything else. I'm here on behalf of the purchasing office, which is the everything else category. And in our case, we generally check references if we're recommending to you that we do business with a vendor we've not done business with recently or have some reason to want to check a reference. If it is a vendor we've been satisfied with recently, we still ask them for references, but we may not actually call and check them.
So the answer is no.
Well, the answer is it depends.
Yeah. I mean, very limited.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Certainly. So before staff invests a lot of time in researching and preparing an ordinance for consideration by the board, we thought it would be helpful if we could pick your brain a little bit about whether this is a tool that you would like to have added to the city's toolkit. And if so, I have a few questions, and based on a conversation with some of my colleagues today, some of these questions are I may rephrase into the form of a recommendation a little bit. But I'll stop there and ask if there are any thoughts on the idea of even having an ordinance.
I think we should. I would support that completely. I also think that we should expand
I do too.
some of these reasons. I am, for example, under B, I think we should have a catch-all kind of crime of dishonesty. In courtrooms, we talk about crimes of dishonesty. I'm not interested in limiting it to whatever business honesty is. If someone if we have a vendor who is a shoplifter, but who has not embezzled from their own employer, that should be a basis for a disbarment, or in my view. So I would expand B to cover just generalized crimes of dishonesty, moral turpitude. I also think that we should capture the idea that I don't particularly want to be awarding any contracts to anybody that ever sued us.
Exactly.
So if you have filed a lawsuit against the city of Franklin, if it is permissible for us to blackball you for that, I would like to do that. I think I'm not saying that people shouldn't sue us, but if they do, they shouldn't expect us to turn around and award them any more bids anytime soon. I don't want to get in the business of having bids come in with professional plaintiffs. And I don't think we've seen that happen, but if we're going to make a policy, we should at least contemplate that it could. I also think, along the same lines, that if you have ever cost us money in a lawsuit by doing a poor job and exposing us to judgment, then you should be persona non grata. So whether you sued us or not, if you have created liability for us as a city, then I don't particularly want to be awarding bids to you, or contracts, or vendor agreements. I do think, however, that it would not be fair to retroactively apply this. So to me, it kind of smacks of ex post facto, making up rules and then applying them backwards on people. So I think we should pass an ordinance And I think we should tell people that going forward, these are our rules. Now, let me be clear. If you have been convicted of fraud, that's too bad. I'm not saying that only convictions that happen after the ordinance. I'm saying, for example, any going forward new bids, if you have a disqualifying event, then you do. So to the extent that it is permissible, I would like to make the list of, events of disqualification a little bit broader. And I think we should specifically contemplate that people who have become litigants or who have exposed us to judgment should not be somebody we're doing business with. I don't want to have vendors that have a lawsuit ongoing putting in bids. Resolve the lawsuit, win or lose, that's fine. If you think you need to sue us, that's fine. But I don't want to be playing patty cake at the same time that I'm litigating. It just makes no sense to me.
I concur. I think we should protect our public, our citizens, with such restrictions because the tax dollars that we are spending on lawsuits related to someone that has misrepresented themselves should not be our responsibility. So I concur, Mr. Chairman.
And I also like the additions too. I think it adds to the discussion and it adds to your presentation. And I would support not only the presentation, but the additions to that presentation also.
Absolutely.
Let me just throw out, like, bankruptcy. I know a lot of businesses have had past bankruptcies. That is not a deterrent, correct? Or should not be? What do you think?
Well, I think
Because
that
a lot of
was,
people have those.
I would probably not suggest that we use bankruptcy. And the reason is that sometimes bankruptcies are not the result of deliberate malfeasance. Sometimes circumstances change, and despite somebody's integrity or best efforts, they find themselves in that situation. I'm not saying that it should not be a criteria that we could evaluate, but I mean, I would say, to me, some of these things should be almost automatic disqualifications. Just, I mean, it doesn't necessarily have to be doesn't necessarily have to be completely, literally automatic. But there are degrees of wrongs in the world. And if you have been convicted for example, number A, letter A, conviction for commission of a criminal offense as an incident to obtaining or attempting to obtain a public or private contract. I mean, if you have been convicted of bribery of a public official, then we're done here, okay? On the other hand, do I want to hold against somebody a 15-year-old shoplifting charge, when that person may have for 14 years, led a life of integrity? I don't necessarily automatically want to disqualify them. So I'm willing to see shades of gray here. I think bankruptcy may be an item that we could consider. If somebody has discharged a debt to a customer under circumstances, that may be something we want to evaluate and keep on the list. But to me, it would not necessarily be it would not be the same degree of seriousness or reason for almost automatic disqualification as, say, bribing a public official or, some of these other things where, frankly, I think if you have exposed us, if you have through a contractual relationship with the city, expose the city to a judgment, I think we're done. I mean, I know what I now need to know. That's a pretty serious situation for me. I don't want to keep doing business with people that have put us in that position. Bankruptcy, I think we should be able to consider it, but I don't necessarily know that it should be considered an automatic.
And this would be toward, one other question. This would be toward the bid, whoever is awarded the bid. What about a subcontractor? That someone, the award bidder that we award the bids to has all these good things. I mean, integrity is good. But there is an issue with a sub that may, just give that some thoughts. I don't know what the answer to that, because I would think our obligation would be to the person we awarded the bid to.
His obligation to us
Well, vice versa. Yeah.
would be the one we awarded the bid to. Alderman Peterson.
Just a few overall ideas, in the sense that I can understand the litigator here having strong feelings about litigation. I understand that. But we have had a track record within fairly recent years of awarding bids to people that have had some litigation with the city of Franklin in some other ways. And as far as I know, on their subsequent work, they have done a good job. But I'm just saying, let's just kind of keep this in mind, and also to say that if anybody's ever sued the city, you know, that, I think that kind of, affects their legal rights. Maybe they have needed to, but I understand, I know exactly what you're talking
People
about.
should pause
I know.
and consider, do they want to be a litigant, or do they want to be a vendor? And I'm not saying they can't be both, but, look, I'm not even suggesting that if you sue us and win, that you should be disqualified. If you sue us and win, you won. Fair enough, okay? But I feel very strongly about people that have exposed us, vendors that have exposed us to liability with third parties. You know.
I know, but I'm just saying, to.
If you sue us and, I'll say this, if you sue us and lose, I don't want to do business with you. You know, sue and win, hey, good for you. Sue and lose, keep walking.
I'm just saying though, that you may be depriving them of some of their legal rights by doing this.
I don't think you have a legal right to both sue us, lose, and keep bidding and winning bids.
Well,
I don't think you have that right. I could be
I have no
wrong.
comment, but I'm just saying.
Well, you have some homework.
We have to do some research
You have some homework to do.
about what form that might take and how that might fit into this. But this is a great discussion for us.
Uh-huh.
So.
I
questioned this at one point when a bid was given, was given, and I was told that there was nothing, we had nothing on the books to prevent this. Now we're getting a chance to put something on our books to prevent this. And I would very much like to see us go through with it. I think it's absolutely ridiculous. It's kind of like our government sending money to Syria while they are to buy guns to kill our soldiers. You know, it's kind of like that. Why should we do for others for them to do us harm? We have been elected to take care of the taxpayers and the citizens of this town, and if we can't do a better job than that, then we don't need to be here. I would go right along with what you're saying, except I just don't think this goes far enough.
Okay. Sound like a motion.
Your comments have been very helpful. If I may, I would, because I listed some questions, I would just like to rifle through them very quickly. On the back, or the second page of the memo,
I think it should apply to anybody we're doing business with.
okay. On number 2, Mr. McClendon is pointing out that the question is, do you want to just focus on construction-related or non-construction related? And a staff recommendation, if I may be so bold as to say, would be that it be for both categories.
Yes.
Number 3 is that I had indicated at the top of the memo that it typically, debarment is only for when you have a formal procurement process. You wouldn't need a debarment tool in your toolkit when you are taking 3 quotes, or maybe it's a small dollar purchase and you wouldn't have a competitive process necessarily. You wouldn't need a debarment because you just choose not to use that vendor. Well, the discussion around the table earlier today at the staff level was maybe we should, just as a precaution to prevent.
I think this policy needs to be probably coextensive with anyone who can protest. If you can protest, then you have to live with this too. If we're going to create the opportunity for somebody to say they didn't get, then we need to probably also subject them to this. Now, I don't want to have to run this. I don't want to have to run to ground every vendor's background who may be trying to, do a $400 repair on a car door or something. But I think it should apply to anybody that has a standing arrangement with the city. If we repeatedly refer, or if we have a standing, like in the past, we've had agreements with vendors that oil changes, for example, oil changes and tire rotation, that kind of thing that we used to send out, maybe we still do. If you have a standing agreement with us, I don't know that we want to subject any one-off $1,000 purchase to this, but,
But collectively, those could reach significant dollar amounts.
yeah, I think anybody that has, what do we have on the 400? I don't know, I mean.
Sort of a blanket purchase
Well,
order.
what do we have,
sort of idea.
what do we call it, master agreement?
Yeah, we have some of those, especially in the streets, some of those areas where
Right,
we have
and,
certain services we draw on from time to time,
Right.
depending on need.
If, or you could even trigger it off some number of purchase orders. I mean, if we're gonna regularly do business with, and I don't know that we need an arbitrary number, but I think it's something to think about.
Okay.
I mean, 6 purchase orders or $10,000, either one might be adequate enough to want to be able to.
We'll give that some additional thought and bring you our recommendation. Item 4, I think we've already discussed. That has to do with the question of, do you wish to limit the period of time of interest to the city? I think staff would recommend that we would not limit the time of interest, but use our discretion, allow for the city to use discretion about if it was a 15-year-old high shoplifting versus something that's more egregious, that we would take that into consideration. And then item 5 has to do with relative to debarments by other governmental agencies. Based on the conversation I had earlier today with other members of staff, we would recommend that you would want to know about any debarment by any other.
I think that should be a standard
Yes,
question on an
absolutely.
RFQ or an RFP or anything else.
And not limited to just, I gave you some choices of maybe just
The
inside
first thing you
Tennessee.
ask an expert witness, have you ever been disallowed to testify as an expert in any court anywhere? I think the same thing.
Do we have that language currently on any request for?
We do not.
Okay,
That's what we're trying
okay,
to
okay.
put in
Good,
place.
you're on the right track.
Would they tell the truth?
They better.
That would be
Yeah.
a reason
That
for
would be,
disbarment right there.
Yeah, that should be on the list, by the way. Falsification of any
Any of this information?
any falsification of, or material misrepresentation in the proposal or bid
Will,
should be a reason to disqualify not only that bid, but that vendor.
All right. Well, I'd like the record to show that I make no promises about this being on the January.
Here's some homework here. Just shut down the bids and vendors until you get this ready.
like a Christmas
Might get to
thing.
work a little bit with the law department on this.
Yes.
Thank you, Brian. That's-
Okay.
Thank you for your input. That's a great discussion. It helps us color in some important
Yeah.
elements of this, so it's great.
Item 13, consideration of proposal to utilize the services of vendor registry as an alternative means for vendors seeking to express interest in doing business with the city.
Mr. Chairman, staff is recommending a outfit by the name of Vendor Registry, which is a 2012 startup located in Knoxville. They're a web-based service, and they offer their services to both buyers, such as the City of Franklin, and sellers, what we would think of as the vendor community. And they are attempting to serve as a means for local governments not only to maintain contact information for their own vendors, but also to find vendors from neighboring communities. And from the seller's perspective, as a one-stop shop for vendors to express their interest in doing business with multiple local governments for the products and services that they offer, and to learn about bid opportunities to do business with local governments. Vendor Registry would not be involved in the process of collecting quotes or bids or proposals or other submittals. Each local government still establishes and controls its own process. Instead, Vendor Registry is trying to make more buyers aware of more vendors and vice versa. Staff recommends that the city put on our website a link to the Vendor Registry registration process that would be activated for the City of Franklin, and offer Vendor Registry service as an optional alternative to the city's homemade online vendor registration system that we now have in place. We're not recommending that we replace it. We're recommending that we offer it as an option available to anyone who's wanting to register in their interest to do business with the city. There's no fee to local government for use of the Vendor Registry service. Vendor Registry's business model is based on the idea that vendors would be interested in subscribing for a fee, currently $29 a month, to learn about other local governments that are offering opportunities to compete for the products and services that the vendors offer. So the concept is based on a fairly modest fee, at least it seems to me, that would be borne by the vendor community. It's not a prohibitive fee, and and there's no fee if they want to go through Vendor Registry just to sign up for one city. They can sign up for one city at a time to their heart's content for free. It's just if they want the whole gamut of client cities for Vendor Registry, then they pay a subscription for that. They can cancel at any time, there's no contracts. The only reason we're bringing this to you...
It's Match.com.
Yeah, that's a pretty good way to look at it.
City mingle.
The only reason we're bringing this to you is that I view the city's public
Joke, the
website...
two married guys.
The city's public website is sort of our turf that we want to protect, and we want that to be as user-friendly as possible, and we want it to be as unbiased as possible. We want there to never be any hint of favoritism or us being in some kind of an unusual relationship with a particular vendor. So it's a little odd to have a link on the city's website to a third party. But we think that this is a case where that makes sense, and we would recommend that you...
Is that a requirement of the vendor?
Yes. The concept that they're proposing is that they have a link on, or that we post a link on our website to their web registration process.
As long, and I'm hoping they don't have any problem with us saying, this is not the only way you can do business with us.
Well, I've told them that I'm not interested in making it exclusive. I am interested in experimenting. I sort of think of it as a pilot for a while. Let's try this, see how it works. I haven't suggested to them that we may ever want to make it exclusive. I frankly would feel like we would need to go through a selection process if we did that. So I'm certainly not here tonight asking to make it exclusive, and I'm not really expecting to come back anytime in the foreseeable future asking you to make it an exclusive arrangement. What I am suggesting is that if we make it an option, side by side with our own in-house tool, where you can express your online, you can express your interest in doing business with the city, I think that that's not a bad way to give this a try and see
I
what our.
wouldn't have a problem with that at all, as long as it's not exclusive. So do you want a motion?
I don't know that we really need a motion, frankly. I just would like a little feedback, and if there's any reluctance on your part, I don't know that this necessarily needs to be an agenda item on a board meeting.
I think we want to use you as a sounding board on it. If you're comfortable with it, we'll move forward. I can send in my update a little bit of a heads up to the rest of the board as well, and we'll move forward with it. We've got almost everybody here anyway, except I guess two folks from the board. So if you're comfortable, we'll go and move forward with it. And as Brian described it, kind of as a pilot, see how this works, and go from there. So if there aren't objections, we'll move forward with that.
Ron, have you talked with them already?
Absolutely.
I mean, in light of the conversation we just had, I mean, any vendor can go there and register in whatever, regardless of course, background and issues or whatever.
Yes. Registering
So-
only is an expression of interest in learning about the opportunity to do business. So think of it as a database, and we would ping them, we would send them an email
Okay.
when, as a heads up to them, hey, we have just released a invitation to bid on XYZ, or a service or a product. And we happen to know that you offer that product or service. We just wanted you to know that we now have, the door is open, or the window is open for you to compete for that business. Registering has nothing to do with the actual competition. It's
Okay.
really a communication tool.
Okay, so it's not,
Good question.
alrighty.
Thank you.
Item 14, monthly reports.
We just generally provide those to you. If you want to ask questions or review any of those, we can, but.
Can you do, since it's our first time, go through?
Well, actually,
Mike or Rusty would have touch base on them just real quick.
Let me take a stab at it
Okay.
and mention that Mr. Stuckey said earlier that we try to do amendments to our budget on a quarterly basis. There's so much noise in the monthly numbers that we would really like for you to focus as much as possible on the quarterly numbers, because we had a case this year where, if you want to look at the very first page, the sales tax, where we had a good July, a not so good August, and then a good September. You know, depending on where the holidays fall and so on, the numbers, you can get caught up in those monthly
How many
reports.
weekends you
Okay,
have
all
a
right,
month.
okay.
So when we
I'll
give you
get
these
out.
monthly reports, they're really for you to look at, to see, to make sure that we disclose as fully as possible what's going on and the nuts and bolts of the important things of the city. But this happens to be the month where item H is the first quarter report. And that's what we'd really like for you to focus on. You'll only get that every third month. But that really starts to tell you something. With 25% of the year gone, here's where we stand. And it's got a world of information. This is Mike Lowe's baby, and he keeps this up and really
Does a great
spends a
job.
lot of time producing this so that you can really look and compare it where we are versus the budget. So, Mike, if you want to pick up some of the highlights on that, it's towards the back. It's got a
It's the last,
blue cover.
it's actually the last thing on
Yeah,
it.
it looks like this. A few years ago, what we did is, we knew that our reporting, we were showing a lot of detail. And it was one that we kind of knew there were some specific numbers that were best to look at. So what we did is, when we changed the format, you'll notice that it is still by fund, and you'll notice that we highlight a lot of the major revenue sources or anything else that's happened in those funds. One thing we did this time is, if you look at page 3, we wanted you to see what impact the proposed budget amendment we would have. So essentially, where it was, the 57.9 million in revenue, that's where you'll see that it's 55